minutes.
We have a majority. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I'm doing the New Hampshire leg of my tour, book tour, promoting my book. I was in Claremont a couple of nights ago, where both Solzhenitsyn and Salinger were residents in that little area. And when someone told me, I had about 15 people there, every person I asked about them, and it was fascinating. None would tell me anything about their experience. Every one of them had experiences with either Solzhenitsyn or Salinger or both, and they were so tight-lipped. You're a reporter, you know. I said, both of them are gone. I get it. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. So, this story that some would say I'm obsessed with, but it's a story that's captivated my life for the last at least 15 years. Relates, and this is my book on it. When the book was finished, and I sent it to the publisher, I liked the cover, of course, the effect of the ripping of the cover gave a sense of theft. But I didn't like this too wordy. I wanted the subtitle. I wanted to be Boston's last best secret. And the reason was because the team that I had helped found back in the early 70s, the Glow Spotlight team, had broken what I considered the two most important secrets of our generation in Greater Boston, Greater Boston, and New England. And I wanted this to be the Boston's last best kept secret. The two others were Whitey Bulger having a secret relationship with the FBI that allowed him to rape, pillage, and plunder, almost with impunity. And with the Glow Spotlight team found in 1988 is the reason why he was able to do it. He had a secret alliance with the FBI. The next series was the next major story, secret broken by the Glow Spotlight team, was in 2002. And that was the clergy abuse scandal that the Boston Catholic Archdiocese was covering up, condoning abuse of kids by priests in order not to bring scandal upon the church. They were not reporting them to the authorities, and as a result, they were just putting them into counseling, the priests, not the kids, the priests, and then putting them back out into parishes, which was a major scandal, and I hope you've seen both of those fortuitously came out as movies this year, and Spotlight won the best movie of the year. I found both those series had purposes, larger purposes than just a crime story or a scandal visited upon a major institution, and I think this too. One of the things that compelled me to it. This too had a higher purpose. Understand what we're talking about here. The story is framed by superlatives. It's the largest art theft in world history. In that sentence alone, there are 3 superlatives. Largest in world history. That's the world. That's beyond, Route 3 and the Kangamangas, and that's the world. In history. That's not just this century or last century, it's forever. And the art, what we're talking about is $500 million that was taken, that was stolen. And it is among the art world's greatest achievements. I just want to go give you a little background on them. This is the museum, and this door back here I'll reference in my talk. This is Palace Road, and this is the fence. Simmons is over here. Boston over here is an MFA, just around the corner. Latin school, my high school is a little further down. There were 13 pieces stolen. Really only 4 of them, make up the bulk of the $400, $500 million of value. This is probably half of it. It is by Vermeer, one of only about 35 Vermeers known to have been painted, a masterpiece of extraordinary proportion. I was at my talk in Madison yesterday afternoon. There was an art professor who was among those who was in the audience, and he reminded me that one of the reasons why this painting is so important, it's an exquisite painting, but in the back there is a painting here, the Procurus, not done by Rembrandt, not done by Vermeer, but by an artist of the time, and that painting itself is at the MFA. So, but this painting is valued, if you could value it, if you could sell it, if you had it, possession of it, it would be valued at starting at $200 million. This, and it's the only Vermeer that we had in all of New England. If you wanted to see Vermeer, and you didn't want to go too far, you go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. This is what I consider the masterpiece of the ages. And this is Rembrandt, this is by Rembrandt. They stole two big Rembrandts that night, this one and this one. Now this is a more traditional Rembrandt, staged, posed, lady and gentleman in black. This is the only seascape he ever painted. He painted about 500 paintings, most of them portraits, or still lifes, in this one. It's an allegorical scene from the Bible. Christ here, and his face is in calm and repose, and his apostles. It is titled "Christ in a Storm on the Sea of Galilee," and I like to say, who knows, but I'll say it. He never had to paint the sea again because you got it so perfect here. It's vivid. You get wet standing too close to it. What I truly like is this, the sense of hope that comes, and the sharpness of the sail. And Rembrandt loved it so much he painted himself in it. This is him, heaving over the side of the boat. Feeling the effects. Like all of the apostles are all in various states of alarm and concern from the storm. And he's telling, and Christ is giving them a lecture to try to calm them. That too was stolen, as was this one. And this is a Manet that was also stolen from the Blue Room. Very interesting, very mysterious that this was taken, and may go into it if I have a little bit of time. Again, another part of the superlatives of this theft, it commands the largest reward that's extant right now for a property crime. $5 million. You have the paintings, bring them in, sight unseen, $5 million. I'll mention this later in my talk, but there's also a no, if you bring it in voluntarily, there's a no prosecution pledge from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So, which is part of the mystery. Why, if they've had this pledge on the table for the past 10 years, bring them in and nobody gets prosecuted and you get $5 million. Why haven't they turned up? It's part of the mystery and part of the extraordinary mystery. And this, they've chased down every lead. To wit, it was in the paper just a month ago that they were back at a house in Manchester, Connecticut, digging up a man's backyard in search of clues, if not the painting. This was the third time they'd been at this house. I'll go into his sketchiness and the mystery about him as to why they're so convinced the feds are that he's got it. And it's also been on the FBI's most wanted list for longer than any other of the 10 major art crimes, except one other. There was a painting stolen out of a Milan church in the mid-60s, and that's still missing as well. But that's a $4 or $5 million. This is a $200 million painting. Excuse me, $500,000. $500 million worth of artwork. And some of it exquisite. Some of it's baffling as to why they took what they took. Let me go into Mrs. Gardner first before I show that. Mrs. Gardner was a true presence in Boston. She came to Boston and married Jack Gardner, one of our richest, Massachusetts, one of our richest and most established individuals. He was a shipbuilder from Beverly, and his family dated back to the Mayflower. So, royal wedding in the Boston area. But they had one child, a boy, but the boy died. And to avoid her from falling into a depression, he said to her, you love art, you love travel, let's go on the high seas. So they began a lifetime of travel. It's not like they would travel a lot. And wherever they went, they would buy art. And the art that they would buy, they would send back. The house that they owned on Beacon Street at the time got filled with art. They bought the house next door, that filled with art. They bought the house on the other side, that filled with art. And as she traveled, and she spent a lot of time back in Boston and became a true presence in Boston, which I'll give you a quote about her. But she got this idea as she traveled with her husband that the artwork that she was finding and locating and buying, she had a higher goal for them. What she wanted to do, she saw that the civilizations that she was visiting and buying the art from were great not just because of their political and military might. They were also great because of the art that they had produced. And she worried, or she was concerned, that America did not have that artistic tradition. Young country, of course, 100 years old at the most at that time, when the idea came to her. And she said, we've got to inspire, we've got to encourage an American tradition of art. We've got to initiate an American. So how to do it? Well, let's get art of the ages here into Boston and bring young and old through our museum. And Jack Gardner liked that idea. So they pledged that they would do it. Once they came in off the road, he passed away in the 1890s, a younger man, and she did come in off the road and began to build this museum. She found the spot herself and worked with the architect and then the contractors in building it, the pavers in building it. And it opened in 1903, and she continued to buy. She continued to buy until her death in the mid-20s. And the collection that she gave us, I measure the greatness of the collection she gave us, I measure this way. This is the statue to artistic achievement in front of the Boston Public Library. And this statue here, you know, woman in top tunic and the palette and the paintbrush, and it lists 8 artists on both sides, 4 here, 4 there. 6 of those 8 artists have their paintings or have their works on display at the Gardner Museum. That's how varied and rich and deep the collection is. It's not just one era. It's the entire modern history. So, and that's how exquisite this collection was. It was the largest privately owned collection of art in America when it opened in 1903. And to go back to that theme of trying to initiate an American tradition of art, she brought the kids in. At first it was free of charge. And it stayed free of charge until the 70s. You could give a donation. And then she started a visitation program for Boston school kids to bring them in, to see the art. And that's what she was trying to do. She was trying to inspire us. And just as a side note, it worked. I can tell you personally it worked. My father, an Armenian survivor of the genocide in 1915, his mother put him on her back and his brother and sister didn't survive, he did. His father was killed. He comes to America, he goes to Watertown High School, and they see he's got artistic talent to him. So, you know, this is in the 20s and early 30s, they send him off to a art college in Boston at the time, and he spends all his time at the museum, loving the masters. And, you know, after I was born, later, he would take me there, and he would want to take me every day, and I wanted to spend my time at another Fenway. He had aspirations for art, I had it for center field. But he was a great artist, and he loved this place. So it worked. And why is that important? I'll get to it at the end of my talk. But when she died, her will had a provision in it, unfortunately, that I think laid the groundwork for the theft. And that, am I changing my talk at all from when you saw me? Okay. Young friend has come for the second time. I just want to make sure a little bit different. The groundwork that the provision in her will was that the museum had to stay the same forever. They couldn't change it. It had to. She wanted this to be a timepiece that she and her husband had collected. And what she required was, and I found it in this talk the other day, that if anything changed, all the artwork would be sold, and I was told the other day it would be sold in Paris, and the proceeds would go to Harvard College, because she just didn't want anything changed. So understand, why did that sow the ground, sow the seed for a theft? Because the trustees who took over and ran it with the same diligence and delight that she did had no purpose. They didn't have to raise any money because they didn't have to buy any new art. Understand your library here. What would it be like if your library did not have, we'll ask later, what if the library did not have to buy any new books? Well, those of you who may be friends of the library wouldn't have to go to your friends and say, you know, would like a contribution, because it costs money to continue the good works, further the good works of nonprofit institutions, as this one is. So, but they didn't have that need. They didn't have to raise any more money because the museum was to stay as it was. And with that mandate, the place began to fray. F-R-A-Y, began to fall into decline. It was no longer the jewel. It no longer had her, of course. I just tell you about her. This is a couple of paragraphs that were written about her. Mrs. Gardner didn't drink tea, she drank beer. She didn't go sleigh riding. Instead, she went walking down Tremont Street with a lion named Rex on a leash, just to break away. There was a little children's zoo right near the Common at Tremont and Boylston. She came upon it because she was living on Beacon Hill, and there was a lion there, and she put the leash on the lion and started walking up Tremont Street. So she really was a personality. I like to think of her both as Julia Child in her bearing, in her presence, in her bearing, but also a flamboyance that was unlike anybody else. Especially Boston was a staid community then, and this woman had flamboyance that matched Madonna at the time. She gave at-home parties at her Beacon Street house and received her guests from the lower branches of a mimosa tree. Told that everybody in Boston was either a Unitarian or an Episcopalian, she became a Buddhist. So she was contrarian, but she also gave us something that in a collection that I think at the time puts her in the same presence as far as she gave to Boston as the Adams family with the Revolution, and the Kennedy family with the progressive politics in Boston. She defined and she enhanced and raised the attention of art and culture to Boston like no one ever had. So But with her death and the place began to fray, the museum security director whom they hired said to me when he came on in the late 70s, early 80s, he said that during the summertime, the minute he came into work, he would have to come in early, he would open all the windows because there was no central there was no central climate control system. So the building it was so humid overnight, the paintings had got moisture on them. The beads of sweat were built on the paintings. We know that's not good. So he said to the board of trustees, and these are not negligent men, but they're just not going out to their friends to raise their money. They didn't have an insurance policy on the collection. They had slip and fall insurance, $25,000 worth of slip and fall insurance, but nothing for the collection. Understand what would have happened. If they had had an insurance policy on this collection, and I'm not saying for the billions that was there, but for however you would insure a collection like this, you would have had a loss prevention person going through every room, going through the, what's happening to the artwork. Who would have said, wait a second, and got the attention. This security director said, sometimes they listened to me, sometimes they did. They did put a central air conditioning for $500,000 in the 80s. He went back to them the next year and said, we're going to have a fire here, and the place is really going to suffer because all they had in the rooms were those 9-volt battery units that we have in our basement, those stick-on units. That's what they had collected. And he thought if there was a catastrophe, it was going to come from a little fire like that spread, or it would come from a broken water pipe. They had the same water pipe system that they had at the time of her death. And he thought, well, shoot, if we have a frozen pipe, boom, we're going to have a problem. But in fact, they said, no, we can't, we don't have it. We gave you $500,000 for the central air last year. We don't have it. So he went out and he raised $50,000 from the corporations in Boston, and he got a fire alarm system put in, a centralized fire alarm system. But it wasn't fire and it wasn't a broken water pump that was going to bring the catastrophe of March 18th, 1990. It's these two platforms. These are two men with and without the fake mustaches. These are the fake mustaches he shouldn't have. The sketches came from sitting with the two night watchmen who were on duty that night. They rang the side doorbell. This is March 18th, 1990, and they rang the side doorbell of the museum at around, well, 1 o'clock, let's say somewhat before 1 o'clock in the morning. And again, it is right here. See this little protuberance. And they say to the night watchman at the desk, we're here to investigate a disturbance. And he knew that there was no disturbance because he had just completed a patrol of the entire museum himself. The way the building was secured at night is one man would sit at the security desk, which is here. It's here. That's the back. This is the back of the security desk, and this is the public area of the security desk. This man was not working the night of the theft because he called in sick. This is March 17th, 1990. And it's almost 24 hours before the theft. This photo was taken. This is taken. It happened March 18th. And I think it happened on March 18th for a purpose. It was designed to be that night. It wasn't done picked at random. Why? Because March 17th is St. Patrick's Day in Boston, which is a holy holiday. And everybody's out in the street, and the kids are getting drunk, and it's a ridiculous, it's fun if you're, under 19. If you're over 19, it's just a hassle. But I think they picked it because they knew, the bad guys knew that there would be, there'd be a full complement of police the next shift. They would all have worked the earlier shift, so they'd be on overtime and not, they just would be less alert. So, but that's just pure speculation on my part. But they're ringing the side bell the side door bell and saying this is disturbance. Now, the man who was at the desk, like I said, he had just finished his patrol. He knew there was nothing going on inside the museum, but what he thought was that some drunken kids had jumped over the back iron fence of the museum, and they were in the back, somebody had seen him and called the police. So that's what they were here. So he makes a grievous error, makes two that night. The first one is he buzzes them in. He's got a little buzzing, he's got a little buzzer here to let them come in. They come in here and they present themselves to him here. There were two night watchmen on that night. One was supposed to be in him, but he called in sick, and so they had another fellow who had never worked that shift before. But they told him nothing ever happens. Just do what Rick tells you to do. Rick was a veteran. He had worked it for about a year, and he liked the shift. Oh, he said to the other guy who filled in, they said to him, bring your trombone. He was a music student. And you can practice. In the middle of the night, you can practice. He brought his trombone, but he was not going to be practicing that night because of now, 1 o'clock in the morning, the side door was ringing. But Rick is at the desk at this point. This is Rick here. This is Rick after he gets handcuffed and brought downstairs. But Rick loved the shift because it allowed him, he was a rock and roller. He too was a music student, but a rock and roller. And the shift allowed him to play his gigs at any of the smaller, seedier bars in Boston, and then jump in a cab and get to work. He told me, he admitted to me that he was often stoned and or drunk when he got to work. But he says, it didn't matter. Nothing ever happened. And I sobered up by 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and I knew what the job was. It was either standing behind the desk, you know, reading the Herald. I don't think the Herald, yeah, I think most of you will have the Herald there. Or listening to the radio and trying to stay awake. Nothing ever happened until this 1 o'clock. And so as I said, the two police officers come around here and they're standing here and they're looking at Rick behind the desk here. And he says to me, all he noticed is they kept going like this, both of them. And he later figured out it was because there was more paste on mustaches. So they say to him, who else is here? He tells them there's another guard doing his patrol. Bring him down. So Rick radios him down. And then the next thing they say to Rick is, you look familiar. We have a warrant out for you. Well, Rick knew in his mind they were mistaken. But he also knew that what they were mistaken about is that he had failed to show up at some court appearance. And having failed to show up for some court appearance, he was now subject to arrest if the police happened upon him. And so he knows that this is now 1 o'clock on Sunday morning. He fears that if they continue to mistake him, you know, he knows there's no disturbance again. And if there is, it's some hooligans in the backyard. That's not a big thing. But they're going to arrest him and they're going to put him in jail overnight. And he won't get out of jail until Monday. And why this was a big concern for Rick is that he had a ticket to that night, Sunday night's performance of the Grateful Dead in Hartford, Connecticut. And he did not want to miss it. I mean, you can see Rick here. His band espoused to, they did some covers for Grateful Dead stuff. The band wasn't bad. I've heard some tapes of late by them. They're not bad. Rick was a bit of a know-it-all. And he had a few scrapes with the museum director, security director, but he knew the job, and he knew how important the job was, and he said he, you know, pretty much followed the T's that he was supposed to cross, except this night where he let somebody in, and he knows, the book says no one gets in. If you have a problem in the museum, someone's banging the door, you call the police. Don't let anybody in. So that was the first mistake. And now the second mistake is when he walks away from the back of they tell him step out of there, he walks over here and he comes out so he can face the two night watchmen. And why is this a second, terrible error? Is the museum had only one alarm to the outside world, and that was here. There's a one bell here. That if you pressed it, a private security firm on the outside of the museum somewhere in Greater Boston would have gotten alerted that there's a problem at the museum, and they would have called the police. So by stepping away from it, he nullifies their only way for the museum to be informed that there's a problem, or for a problem to be told about. He walks away from that. The minute he walks out, they turn him around and they put handcuffs on him. And the second night watchman is walking in at that point, and they do the same to him. And then they bring them both downstairs, and they have the museum to themselves. And they spend another hour and 10 minutes. They spend in all about 88 minutes inside the museum. They go on a rampage. Yes, they steal 13 pieces, but the way they steal it gives the investigators a real sense of the motive here. Not just of who they are, but the motive. And why do I say that? You can see this. This is one of the paintings that was stolen. This is the Dutch room. They spent their time, apparently, in 2 second-floor rooms. One is the Dutch room where they get the biggest artwork. The 2 Rembrandts and the Vermeer. This is another painting. I think it was thought to be a Vermeer, but it thought to be a Rembrandt, but it's not. But every painting, every frame that has a glass front gets broken. The frames get broken, and on the 2 large Rembrandts, they use like X-Acto knives to cut the canvases away from the backings of the painting. So why does that give me a motive? The major thought, mostly because of Hollywood, is that this was commissioned. Some person could not live without a Vermeer. Some, multi-millionaire drug dealer or whatever, diamond dealer or gun dealer could not live without a Vermeer. So he commissions a couple of thugs to try to break into the museum, and they're successful. But in telling them what to steal, they would never have treated the artwork like this because they're doing ruinous damage to the works as they're stealing. So I discard that. I discard that there is a Mr. Big. If any of you have seen Thomas Crown Affair with not Steve McQueen, that was another type of robbery, but with Pierce Brosnan. There's no Pierce Brosnan here. These are thugs. It gave me an idea of, so I continued as I did my reporting, and so much of my book is fresh reporting. It was one reason the Times liked it the most, is how fresh the stuff is, the material is. The New York Times liked the book. I did lots of work into art, especially in Boston, and I interviewed a lot of bad guy gang members and thieves, and came up with, there was a well-established theory, myth, for the bad guys, it's a fact, that artwork like this is, again, if you haven't stolen a piece, if you've stolen a piece of precious artwork, and I'm not talking about $100,000 or something that we'd get out of, the richest members of our family's house, not $100,000. You've got a multi-million-dollar piece of art that has shaken the society, that winds up on the front page of the Boston Globe, the Union Leader, you know what I'm talking about, that is going to get the FBI to try to do some ransoming with you. This is what the bad guys believe, that a piece of art like this is a get out of jail free card. And by that I mean, if you call up the feds and you say, oh, that Rembrandt, I can get you that Rembrandt back, but my brother-in-law or my criminal associate, he's doing a hard time. Can we do business with, to get the bad guys believe that's a reality. And where that comes from is a theft that took place in Monmouth, Maine in the early 70s. There's a Woolworth estate up there, and they stole two guys, one of them legendary Boston minor art thief, but legendary in the Boston area, named Miles Corrin. And Miles and a partner of his stole 5 or 6 Wyeth paintings. and, you know, the Wyatt family. And he came down to Boston, Miles on his own came down to Boston and tried to fence it. He thought he had found the perfect fence. The perfect fence turned out to be an FBI undercover agent. So Miles gets locked up, and he's facing 8 years in prison. He reaches out, and Miles is absolutely cunning. I mean, some of them, you know, are really sort of, all of them are aggressive, all of them look for scores, but some of them are pretty cunning. I want to say smart, but they're always looking for the angle. Well, Miles comes up with the angle that if I get another piece of artwork, and they'll do business with me, they'll go light on my sentence. 8 years he was going to get for that, for the museum up in, excuse me, from the estate up in Maine. He tells his gang, and they pull off a theft with guns. They go into the MFA, and you can do that, you know, but you know, you use guns, you're going to get, that's a serious crime. So, but they steal a Rembrandt off of the wall of the MFA, and they hide it under a bed of the mother of one of the girlfriends of the gang members, and it stays here for about 2 years. And Miles is playing with the court, playing with, again, putting off the trial. Finally, 2 years later, he tells his lawyer, if they want their Rembrandt back, I can get it back for them. And the feds go to Miles and say, what are you talking about? He said, I want a deal. You want to deal with me on my 8-year sentence? I'll get you your Rembrandt back. They said, Miles, we're not in the business of making deals with criminals. Get us our Rembrandt back, and then you can tell the judge that you helped us get it back. So Miles says, well, that's good enough for me. So he gets the Rembrandt back, they put it back on the wall of the MFA, and Miles goes to court, and he gets an 8-year sentence for the one, which he faced anyway, and he gets another 8-year sentence. But the deal that the judge worked out is that they would be served concurrently, one 8-year sentence. But you can't dispel this myth. And I would talk to the bad guys, and I said, I know where this myth comes from. It's a myth. You're not going to get out of jail. No one's getting out of jail.